There was an explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig managed by BP. When the explosion took place, 11 workers were killed. Dozens of workers were injured. And then there began not a leak and not a spill, but a gush. A gush of really ugly stuff from 5 miles under the ocean. A leak suggests you take a bottle and you turn it over. And there's a finite amount of stuff. And then when it's empty, it's empty. This wasn't one of those. There was a virtually unlimited supply of oil in the bottom of the ocean, and it started gushing up, and it kept going for 98 days. Somebody described it as it's as if you took a plug and pulled it out of the bottom of the earth, and all the ugly stuff in the middle of the earth just came squishing out. This is really ugly stuff. So what would reasonable people appropriately expect a responsible operator of an oil rig to do when there's an explosion, when 11 people are killed, when dozens are injured, and when an environmental catastrophe of great magnitude is looming? What would reasonable people appropriately expect? Well, number one, you need to know how to fix this. In fact, you're required by law to know how to fix this. So that's a reasonable expectation. What else? You got it right the last time. Remember? What did he say?
Apologize.
Yeah! Somebody better say, we're sorry this happened. What else would you reasonably expect? Let us make it better for you. What else would you expect? Keep the public updated. Good. You'd expect them to know how it happened, so you can prevent it from happening again. You can make a good list of what people would reasonably expect. What should the first communication from BP be? What should the first communication from BP be? We are looking very carefully into what happened on the Deepwater Horizon. We are cooperating fully with all public safety and rescue and environmental entities, including the Coast Guard. We deeply regret the loss of life and injury that happened to our employees. You can imagine what a responsible company could say. Here is what the CEO of BP said in his first communication immediately after this event. He said, look, the Gulf of Mexico is a very large body of water. And however much of this ugly stuff is coming out of the bottom, it's coming into a very large body of water. You're smiling. What's behind the smile?
I just find it funny that his immediate response is to, instead of acknowledging it and taking responsibility, communicating empathy and care. It's like, it's not a big deal. You're gonna,
He's rationalizing the problem away.
Yeah, well, it's just, don't worry about it. It's just a couple thousand fish and wildlife.
Don't forget the pelicans.
Exactly.
Right? This is all too regrettably a common first response. I sometimes refer to it as, there's only a little bit of rat feces in the flour, make a cake. Only a little bit of rat feces. Go ahead. No, thank you. The attempt to rationalize away when the Boston Archdiocese 12 years ago discovered that a large number of priests were sexually abusing children. The Pope said, well, only 1% of priests in the United States do that. He really said that. I, of course, said, let's say he's right. How many priests are there? I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and I discovered there were 45,000 priests. What's 1% of 45,000? 450. Is it okay that 450 people are committing the same crime in your institution? Probably not. What Tony Hayward did, what all too many companies and leaders do, including leaders of good moral standing, is attempt to rationalize away the problem. Never helps. Never helps, but that's what he did. What is your impression when you read that?
He doesn't care.
He doesn't care. What else is your impression when you read that? So let's get our basic body of water nomenclature right. Good. What else?
He's not responsible.
He seems not to be taking responsibility, at least for the damage that is foreseeable. He's not at all sorry. And, sorry?
He doesn't have an answer.
He doesn't have an answer, and what does that do to your confidence in VP? He doesn't care. How likely are you, as you're driving down the road and you see a BP station on the left and a Sunoco station on the right, which one are you going to pull into? For now, let's build the case. It gets worse. So that's his first statement. Here's his second statement. This was not our accident. This was not our drilling rig. This was not our equipment. This was Transocean's rig, even though you, sir, called it the BP platform. Why did you call it the BP platform?
They're the ones that subcontracted them.
BP is the what? They're the contractor, yeah?
I was just going to say they were the ones, but they were the ones using the equipment.
Yep. So how does this work for you?
Last statement is, it doesn't help.
It doesn't help who?
Lowers my, my view on BP oil.
Lowers your view on BP oil. What else? What does that statement do for you?
It's avoiding
He's avoiding what?
whatever the question was that he gave that book to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm assuming it was, like, how do you feel about this or something along those lines? He was just like, oh,
It's not our concern.
you got a question on the road.
Right. Right. He's avoiding responsibility. But here's my favorite part. That's not the full quote. Huh? Yeah. So here's the full quote. Want to hear the full quote? That was Transocean's rig, Senator. That was Transocean's rig, Senator. And, of course, the Senate committee that is inquiring of the chairman of BP hears him say that. And so the most generous next question is what? So here's the next question. Well, what do you say about that, Transocean? Transocean CEO sitting there says, well, Senator, it was our rig. But all accounts are that the explosion was caused by faulty cementing at the base of the well. And that cementing was done by our contractor, Halliburton. So what does the senator ask next? What about that, Halliburton? And the CEO of Halliburton says, Senator, yes, we did the cementing. But we were following BP protocols in all of our cementing. Well, what about that, BP? And it was just this for the entire hearing. How does that make you feel? It's crazy. They're paying this guy $1 gazillion to be the CEO of BP. How's he doing so far? Huh? Not very good at his job. He's a brilliant petroleum engineer. That's not the same thing as being the CEO. So, this continues like this. And Tony Tony Hayward gets increasingly frustrated that people are saying mean things about him. And then on day 39, he holds a meeting with his employees down in the Gulf. He holds a meeting with his employees, and everyone gathers around the table, and the employees do what employees do. They take their phones and they put them on the table. As some of you do when you come to class, you take your phone and you put it on the desk. And that phone, as you know, is not only a phone, it's also a highly sophisticated recording and transmission device built into a phone. So the employee turned on the record button and put the phone on the table. And Tony Hayward had the very poor judgment of talking in the meeting. And in the meeting, he reviewed all of the nasty stuff that people were saying about BP, and then he asked this question. What the heck, he didn't say heck, but I'll say it, did we do to deserve this? The employee was somewhat offended at that. And within 10 minutes of the meeting ending, the video of that was up on the YouTubes. And then it was everywhere. Then it was on CNN, it was on the BBC, it was in the New York Times, it was on Facebook. And what did we do to deserve this mean to you? You read that, you hear that, what's your reaction? You didn't? Okay, what occurs to you when you hear him say, what did we do to deserve this? How do you feel when you read that? Yeah.
Angry.
Angry. You should. Yeah.
I honestly feel that he is scared and just kind of venting, and I think that on the employees' part, for him to have reported it in the first place.
Yeah, he already fired.
This had malicious intent from the beginning before he said that.
You bet.
He was
He was trying to work it out in his own mind. Yeah. But he's scared. He's scared. Of course he's scared. He's also tired. He hasn't slept in 39 days. He hasn't had a good night's sleep in 39 days. That's part of what comes with crises.
I feel like anyone privately, like he wasn't declaring this in a speech, anyone privately would talk about things like that or have that question, like what is going on is a huge detriment to my career and overall thing. It's just bad. It's bad for him that it got shown that.
But it did. And what would reasonable people appropriately expect a responsible leader to do when this becomes public? I'm sorry? Apologize. Good. So Mr. Hayward sees the result of what he said public, and so he turns to his PR people. He turns to his PR people, Billy, and he says, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix this. Andrea, go get the news media. Go get the television crews. Assemble them outside. I'm going to go out there, and because I was advised to, I'm going to apologize. I'm going to apologize, and further, I'm going to tell people that our interests are completely aligned. I want to fix it. You want me to fix it. We're aligned. So Billy, go get the news media. Andrea, go get the television crews. I'm going to fix this. And here he is fixing it.
We're sorry. Actually, we're sorry for the massive disruption it's caused to their lives. And there's no one who wants this thing over more than I do. I like my life back.
I'm sorry. I hear some sounds from this side of the room. What are you responding to? He sounds selfish. He lacks compassion, which is another way of saying he doesn't care. Yeah.
I feel it was good until this last sentence.
Yeah. If only he said, look, we're sorry. We're sorry for the massive disruption that's caused people's lives. No one wants this over more than I do. It would have been just fine. But he was angry. He was scared. He was not optimal because he was sleep deprived. So he said just a little more than he should. I'd like my life back. As soon as he says, I'd like my life back, the spiral began. And a lot of people took the occasion to point out there are 11 people who will never get their life back. There's dozens of people who are not going to get their lives back without a lot of pain. And there's hundreds of thousands whose livelihood has already been disrupted and is likely to be further disrupted. What's wrong with you? And the what's wrong with you narrative became a huge narrative. I was teaching this case at the United States Defense Information School, which is where the U.S. military sends its public affairs officers, its PR people, to be trained. I was teaching in the first day of the Senior Public Affairs Officers course. These are highly experienced PAOs, public affairs officers. And in the audience, there are about 30 people, all in different forms of camouflage fatigues. So there were Marines, there were Air Force, there were Navy, there were Army, and then there were two guys, a younger guy and an older guy, that weren't in fatigues. They were in bright blue. And as soon as I showed this tape, and Tony Hayward said, I'd like my life back, the two guys in blue, they swung their heads and they looked at each other. And I noticed that, and I paused. And I said, Coast Guard, is there something you'd like to share? And the younger guy looked up at the older guy, and the older guy nodded his head. And the younger guy said, Sir, we were there. I said, really? You were at the press conference? I said, Sir, we were just to Mr. Hayward's left, just off camera. And I have permission to tell this story. I said, really? What happened then? The younger guy looks at the older guy nods his head. The younger guy says, Sir, as soon as Mr. Hayward said, I'd like my life back, our phones rang. It was our commanding officer. He told us, get off the stage. And we left. And we never did a press conference with BP again. When Tony Hayward said, I'd like my life back, the U.S. Coast Guard stopped standing next to him in public. That's huge. Their most important business partner lost trust in BP at that moment. Tony Hayward continued to say things that were counterproductive, and about 80 days after he said this, he was not fired, but he was reassigned. And his reassignment was to become the CEO of a joint venture between BP and a Russian oil company based on the Pacific coast of Russia. So, Andrea, Tony Hayward was sent to Siberia.
Literally.
And he refused to go, and he resigned. And he stopped being the CEO of BP. He stopped being the CEO of BP not because the Deepwater Horizon exploded, killing 11 people. He stopped being the CEO of BP because he completely mishandled the aftermath. He completely mishandled the aftermath by failing to show he cared. And when he did speak, by giving everyone the impression that he cared only about himself. That he didn't care about what happened, and he didn't care about the people whose lives were disrupted. So the first choice to make is, what do we do? The second choice to make is, when do we do it? When do we do it? And one of the ways to understand when to do things is to recognize stakeholders know that bad things happen all the time, even to good organizations. It's what you do about it that matters. It's not the thing that goes boom that causes trust and confidence to fall. It's your failure to show